Welcome to Homeschool Lounge. Joining me is Shirley Erwee and Frank Muller. We're going to talk about the importance of entrepreneurship and preparing your children for the future. Shirley, will you please kick off the conversation?
Okay, well, I had to learn about this as an adult because our school education never really taught us about being business-minded. And I often tell the story of how I was taught, go to school, get good grades, go to university and get a good education, then you can get a good job and you'll have security. And it turned out that I got married, moved to a small town, and there wasn't a corporate ladder to climb. And one day we were visiting somebody, and it was my father-in-law, and he said to me, "So Shirley, what's your idea for a business?" And I had absolutely no answer because I'd never even considered that as a question. Whereas he had always been self-employed, and my husband has always had the mindset of you work for yourself and you do your own thing, you run your own business. And as a young mom wanting to supplement the family income, I soon learned that, you've got to find ways to earn some income. And I realized that an entrepreneur, this is my definition, other people may differ, but it's somebody who sees a need or sees a problem and offers a solution. And because there's such a high unemployment rate in our country, I figured it's a good thing to pass on to your children too. The mindset of you can work for yourself, you can find a product or a service and you can sell it and you can be self-employed. And so I've tried to learn more about that for myself and for my kids.
Frank, what's your take on it?
Well, yes, it's a similar story to Shirley's in many respects, where I did not have any intention of becoming an entrepreneur. I was, in my instance, climbing the academic ladder. I studied medicine and then went on to become a pharmacologist and was running a research unit when I had a health crisis and actually lose my job because of it. We're talking 22, 23 years ago. And so suddenly I found myself in poor health and without a job. And that is not a good position to be in. And I had to start from scratch and had to find a way of earning an income when nobody really wanted to employ you. So that was my introduction to entrepreneurship. I always boast that I've probably closed more companies than anybody else on the planet. I started things and they didn't work. And over time, I learned the hard way what works and what doesn't work in small business. I had a number of very good mentors, which was helpful. But of course, dealing with health challenges at the same time as dealing with income challenges, it's not always so simple. Now, in the meantime, I got married and we also have a string of kids. And like Shirley, I wanted to impart what I've learned to them. And again, I've made many mistakes in that process of teaching entrepreneurship to children. But I also have learned some valuable lessons that actually work. So that's my passion, is to help other people to start their own businesses and to get going as early as possible. In my experience, there's about a 10-year minimum gap between starting out and actually getting good at it. And some people are adept from an early age and they actually can shorten the period, but I think for most people, 10 years is the least amount until you actually start thinking like an entrepreneur and start being good at business. And that's the reason also why I want my children to learn it, so that by the time they actually have to leave home, they're able to earn an income and not have to be dependent on employment or bursaries or so for their livelihood.
Shirley, what would you, how do you go about teaching your children about entrepreneurship? It's definitely the buzzword, but I'm coming from the same generation where my dad had a job with the same company for 30 plus years and you had to go study a specific thing. How do we train our children and what about the changing future?
Sure, I don't have a formula for success because like Frank, we're still on this learning curve of trial and error. But I think an important thing for parents to understand is especially the ones who maybe aren't natural entrepreneurs, is that the sooner you start this learning curve with your children, the better. And start them with small ventures that don't cost a lot. And if they fail, well, you just write off that money as school fees, because the best time to fail is for a child is when they're at home living with mom and dad and you're paying for the roof over their head. And if something goes wrong in their business because of something that they don't know or underestimated or something that they lack, you know, their whole life isn't going to fall apart. And I've done that with my kids. Some of them are more entrepreneurially minded than others. And we've done a couple of little ventures. Some didn't work. Some I've put an end to because the child was too young and it was taking too much supervision and admin that was falling on my shoulders because the child couldn't do it. So that was a learning curve for me. You know, the idea is there, but the child's not mature enough to try it out. But I think the most important thing is to get the children thinking about business ideas. And a place that always inspires me is a local flea market that our family often goes to. We go there for coffee on a Saturday. Because at this flea market, there are entrepreneurs selling handmade goods, and it's handmade and it's local. And I often just sit there and I look and I think, you know, these people were so creative to find something they love doing and to think that somebody else wants to buy it. And then you look there and you think, sure, you know, can you make a living on that? Yes, this one maybe can. No, that one can't. That looks like a popular stall. You know, the food stalls are always busy. The arts and crafts, maybe not. But it gets you thinking and it gets those creative ideas flowing. And the other place to look is online, because online is a great place to do business too. So, yeah, we have to explore our options.
Frank, how do you do it?
I think I'll just step back that I've always said to anybody who's caring to listen that you should never confuse income with education. And there is this general perception of society that the better your education, the bigger your income. But that's only true for a very small number of graduates. About a quarter of all B graduates in South Africa are currently unemployed. And even amongst the masters and the PhDs, there are a number of unemployed people. I remember having a plumber when I was still living in Cape Town, and she had a PhD in quantum physics, but couldn't find a job, and so she became a plumber. So don't confuse income with education. And many parents think that if they give their children a good education, they will thereby ensure a good income. What ensures an income is a very different kettle of fish. And so trying to teach my children the same approach is part of my bigger picture. The other thing is that I think that what I would rather prefer to call small business people rather than entrepreneurs are raised, not educated. And I use the example of a cake, that you bake a cake, it rises in the oven, and if you open the oven too soon, it flops. Education is a bit like the icing on the cake. If you want to educate or train your child in business, then that's the icing on top. But the rising of the entrepreneurial cake, in a sense, has to happen from within, and that takes time. And you as a parent can nudge, can model, can, like Shirley, take children to flea markets and other places to evaluate what other people are doing. But that process is very much person dependent, has to do with character, personality, life experiences. So it's not a curriculum that you can push down the child's throat and then you have an entrepreneurial child. One of my children, she was 3 years old when we started selling cookies door to door, completely shy at that point, but a very good baker in the kitchen even at that age. And after 6 months, she was able to present herself with full confidence, and she made a lot of money for a 3-year-old selling cookies door to door. And to this day, it's now 7 years later, she is still making money in that direction, although our situation has changed. In this case, it was a growing and maturing process on her side, not so much that we made money out of it. And that's a big thing when you're raising your kids to be entrepreneurs, that the focus should never be on the money. And Shirley has mentioned it a number of times already. It's the service part. And to me, if you don't understand a service and you don't understand empathy, you cannot become a good person at business, because your client wants to feel that you understand their problem and that the solution that you're offering is fit for their problem. So a child needs to be taught gently to look outside of itself to find problems. So one of the first steps I try with my children is to ask them on a regular basis around the meal table if they can spot any problems that need solving around the house, to make them aware simply that there is a problem that needs solutions. That is a far cry from making millions on the internet or so, but it's the most important part of business is spotting problems and proposing solutions. This is very far from now charging a fee for that, but if your children can say, Dad, I think the car needs a wash, or the pavement needs weeding, or maybe the plants need watering, if your children can pick that up on a regular basis, you've taught them a major life lesson, and that will be in their favor even if they enter normal employment and not work for themselves, because every employer loves an employee who can spot a problem and propose a solution. You will do very well even as an employee. So that's not education per se, that is actually a character and a personality trait. So as I start, when I talk about raising entrepreneurial kids, you start with the service side and asking questions like I proposed and doing things like that to gently nudge them into looking for problems that can be solved. The other side is empathy, where you try and play role games where the child has to play the role of a potential client. And if you've got more than one child, you can actually have the two children doing a mime or a theater on this to try and get children to think through the eyes of the prospect. If they're able to put themselves into the shoes of a prospective client, that's a major important skill as well for business in future. It's the person who is able to think through the eyes of the prospective client who's going to make a good business. And this is a fun game for children. They don't know it's all about becoming business people. They think it's fun, but that skill of putting yourself in other people's shoes is critical later when you're developing products or services and you're trying to market them.
Shirley, we often
I like
about the industrial revolution and how jobs that doesn't exist today will be the jobs our kids do in 5 to 10 years' time. How do you see entrepreneurship fitting into the changing economic world?
It's very difficult to prepare children for jobs that you don't know what they're going to be. And so I think an important aspect is training their character and training them to be lifelong learners and to understand that they're going to have to keep on upskilling. And I just want to go back to something that Frank mentioned, because I think it's a key point. He said, it's not about the money. And my husband says that to my son, who's just dreaming about making money all the time. He says, remember, it's not about the money. You've also got to love what you're doing and do it well. And by letting our children work in the home and do chores, we have the opportunity to train them to do things thoroughly and properly and on time. And then the other very important thing is people think that to teach children about money, you must give them money. And I disagree, because in the adult world, we don't get money for nothing. That's social welfare. So we don't give our children pocket money or a regular allowance. They have to do what Frank's children have to do as well, and come and say, how can I earn 5 Rand? How can I earn 20 Rand? And they do. Sometimes they know somebody's got a birthday coming up and they want to buy a gift with their own money, or they want to go to a movie and then they need money. And so they have to start thinking, okay, what needs getting done, you know? And that's teaching them that they can sell their service. Then they can also learn that they can sell a product. But training them to learn to offer their skills and their services and to do a job well, I think is one of the most important things we can do. And then, you know, I'm also teaching my kids how to use the internet and how business works on the internet, just in in practical things that we do. I mean, they've all learned how to shop online. I think every modern day kid soon discovers where the online shops are and how to search for the gadgets and the goodies that they want to buy. So they see how other people are trading online, and that gets them thinking. And YouTube is also a place where they see other people trading and making money. They follow certain YouTube channels. So they're exposed to it, and they have to reach a point where they decide they want to be part of that industrial revolution.
Frank?
Frank, what do you say?
Yeah, I've often said to other parents and homeschooling parents that the jobs of the future are there for those who are able to unlearn and relearn skills. And it's as important to teach your children to unlearn and to relearn as it is to teach them the 3 R's. Because my generation, we grew up learning a skill that would be with us for the rest of our working life. And I still see that happening all the time. People act as though nothing has changed for the past 40 years. You're still doing the same thing over and over again because that's what you were taught. But things are not stable anymore. Typically, in my generation, you start losing your job around the age of 50, and then you suddenly have to find a new way of earning income because it's too far away from retirement just to go and sit on the beach. And that's the crunch time, is that my generation never learned to unlearn what they were taught at university, for example. So there's a process that you use to, or that you need to tell your kids that information as such is useful, but it's not all. There's knowledge and there's wisdom. And you need to raise your kids being able to handle knowledge at the arm's length and to change it with better knowledge when it comes around. And the big thing is, if your child is people focused, people will always have problems, and even though the nature of those problems can shift, your child will always be ahead of the pack if your child is able to expect those problems before they happen and to provide or think up a solution for those problems. So we're walking into an era where robots will replace, for example, many doctors and lawyers and engineers, which used to be very stable professions. But there will still be people needed to code those robots. There will still be people needed to do basic artisan skills like plumbing and electrician work, and even things like baking and candlestick making. You have certain things that will remain, but they will change in the nature to some extent. But the big question is always, how can I serve? And I also teach my children that if they offer their services to a neighbor or somebody who's not directly part of our family, not to ask for money, but when the person's, when, for example, go to a neighbor and say, may I mow your lawn? And the neighbor says, how much are you going to charge for that? And then the child just answers, whatever you think is right. So that the money issue is not part of it, it's the service issue that becomes central. And to have that approach for now, that whatever you think is right is all that is needed for the child to get the experience of doing the job. And then maybe there's a tip 5 rand, maybe there's 10 rand, who knows? It can be more, it can be less, but it's not for the money, it's for the experience, because you're building a CV. And as time goes by, that same neighbor may allow you to wash his car, may allow you to do more responsible things around the house, and eventually that neighbor can become a reference on your CV when you apply for a job, or when you go to the next person. So you go to the neighbor 2 houses down the line and say, look here, Mr. Bertha next door has been using me to mow his lawn. Would you mind me mowing your lawn as well? And now I can charge you 50 rand for a mow because now I've got a reference. So that is part of the process. It's a slow process. It can take many years before you get to that level, but that's the heart is the important part. And then I agree with Shirley on the one side that it shouldn't be about money, but I do think it's important for children to handle money. So we don't give our children pocket money. It's not, I don't think it's right for children to give pocket money. It sounds like a social grant as far as I'm concerned, and I want my children to learn to be proud of what they've got in the purse, but to have work with money in the sense that you're able to count money, able to sort money, and be comfortable with handling money. That is important. On the other hand, I think barter is a very important skill for all children. Children automatically understand barter. And if you give your child, let's say, blue marbles and the next child red marbles, or if you only have one child, you give the neighbor's child red marbles and the child down the street yellow marbles. Slightly different but similar, and you'll be surprised how quickly they start bartering these out. Your son may want a yellow marble and he goes to swap it with a blue marble, and so it goes on. That exchange of finding common ground is crucial for any business transaction. And starting off with something innocent like a barter system, and you can be clay cards, it can be marbles, it can be stamps, you name it. There are many things that children would love to have and to trade, and that is where the corner of small business starts.
Frank, I'm going to stop you there. This is definitely a conversation we'll need to have again. But yeah, we want to keep this one short, but not too short. So I thank you for your valuable input, both you and Shirley, and for practical hints. And I must say, I'm feeling less fearful. I'm quite risk averse, but the way you mention how we train our children is quite practical. Thank you.